Well, hello, Gig Harbor Film Festival fans and supporters. My name is Matt Haver, and welcome to another episode of our artist interview series. Up next on our Monday movie series at the Galaxy Gig Harbor on June 30th at 6:30 p.m., we'll be screening what people are calling a hauntingly beautiful film from back in 2022 called The Cry of Granuaile, written and directed by our guest, Dónal Foreman. It's the story of a grieving American filmmaker, played by Dale Dickey, and her Irish assistant, played by Judith Roddy, as they tour the west of Ireland, researching a film about Granuaile, also known as Grace O'Malley, the legendary 16th century rebel and pirate queen. The two women develop an uneasy intimacy as they journey toward a remote Atlantic island where boundaries begin to blur between past and present, myth and history, dream and reality. Can't wait to talk about this one. So, our guest, Dónal Foreman, is an Irish filmmaker living somewhere between Dublin and New York. He joins us from the Big Apple today. His three features are currently streaming on the Criterion channel and are also available to rent or buy on Vimeo on demand, alongside his father's seminal 1979 debut, The Patriot Game. Dónal, thanks so much for joining us.
Good to be here.
So, as we mentioned, your dad, Arthur McCaig, was a director, editor. He was a cinematographer specializing in documentaries. So, is it true? Does filmmaking get passed down in the genes? And tell us about your journey as an artist and when you first knew you wanted to make a career to telling stories on film.
Yeah, well, I started making films with my friends on a VHS camera when I was 11 years old. And that kind of just evolved naturally out of hanging out and playing with my friends. My father, I didn't live with growing up, and I didn't really know him very well. Just something I kind of explore in the film that I made about him. Uh, so he wasn't a direct influence on my life in that way. I wasn't thinking about his uh, his filmmaking work when I was starting to do it, but there could very well be some unconscious connection. And yeah, who knows what goes on at the
Through the
genetic
DNA,
level.
right? So, this film, The Cry of Granuaile, was released in 2022, but your filmography, on your website at least, goes all the way back to 1997. Again, sounds like way further back with the VHS and your buddies. But it includes two other feature films, fiction, nonfiction stories, and you've got nearly 20 nonfiction short films to your credit. We see a lot of those at the Film Fest, obviously. The character, this subplot, Granuaile, her life was really kind of straddled the line between real history and folklore, making her now kind of an enduring icon of Irish culture, feminist history, if you will. What drew you to her life and legend as a subplot for this movie?
Um, yeah, I mean, I'd grown up hearing the stories about her, and as a kid, I'd been on some road trips with my mother around that part of the country in the West Coast. Um, and she always seemed like this really fascinating figure, and it was surprising that she hadn't been dealt with in film. Uh, so I'd been thinking about that for a while, and then when I started coming up with this idea and started researching more about her, the thing that really fascinated me was that blurry line between myth and history, because there was a lot of stories about her that I had thought were historical reality, and a lot of people talk about in that way. And then I delve into it and be like, wait, like that there doesn't seem to be any actual basis for that. Like it's just a story that people have been told, or there's so many things like we don't go into it too much in the film, but there's like a famous meeting between her and the Queen of England, Queen Elizabeth. That's like one of her kind of most iconic stories. And there's documentation that she went to London to petition the Queen. There's no record of them having actually met. But there's a lot of stories about it, and someone did a drawing of it in the 18th century, and someone saw the drawing, and just the way these things uh, kind of go back and forth, and then seeing how like the story and her image kind of changed with each generation, and now there hasn't been a lot in film about her, but there's been comic books. There was a Broadway musical that didn't work out very well, but there's been all these kind of reinterpretations of her. And you see each time people are projecting their own meanings or the meaning of their time onto her and kind of giving a different spin on what her story means. So I got really fascinated by that. And it seemed also like, the story, I ended up tying it in with themes of grief and loss. And I was thinking about how when we lose someone in our life, we project a lot of things onto the people in our lives. And when someone dies, they mean things for us. And that meaning can change over time. And sometimes it's not really about who the person was, but it's what they meant to us. So all these themes started bubbling up for me, and I got kind of excited about exploring it.
Yeah, and what a big project to take on. I mean, here's an individual that meant or means a lot to an entire nation. So no easy task. And you decided to shoot the film on 16 millimeter. It's got that, distinctive grainy aesthetic, evokes a certain nostalgia. We think of people like Wes Anderson. And atmosphere is such a strong feature in this story. How did you decide on the look you wanted this film to have and eventually on the 16 millimeter?
Well, as I started developing the character of this American filmmaker, Moira, played by Dale Dickey, I saw her as being this kind of underground experimental filmmaker coming from New York who I imagine was like working in that tradition of shooting on film. So it made sense to me that she would be shooting her film, which becomes this film within the film,
Yeah.
that she would be shooting that on film. And originally I was going to have a contrast that her film would be celluloid and the wider film that we're watching would be digital. But then I realized that as the film goes on, I wanted to blur the lines between her film and our film, and between the kind of reality and the fiction within the fiction. So then I thought, okay, so now it's all going to be on film then.
Mhm.
So that was that it made more like conceptual sense than it did practical sense because it was very difficult. It's very difficult to shoot on film, particularly in Ireland now, because you can't rent the cameras there. There isn't any labs to get processed. You've got to send it to London. And then we were shooting way out on the West Coast so someone would have to drive the the rolls of footage to Dublin and then send them to London and all this stuff. So it was a complicated process. And then also a lot of the films that I was inspired by or that I was thinking of in terms of the look were films from the 70s, like Robert Altman's film Images
Mhm.
or Don't Look Now by Nicholas Roeg. And all the references I was thinking of were shot on film. So it also made sense to work with that. And I think yeah, I mean, it's uh it's worth it's worth making the effort, I think, just to kind of do one's part to keep it alive, keep shooting on film alive as well.
Well, it sounds like it's pretty experimental in a lot of ways, and that's actually what the reviewer in the Irish Times, Tara Brady, said. She said, "Experimental film is seldom so playful as this movie," and it sounds like you had a really great team around you. You had a cinematographer and especially the folks that scored the movie. And I want to let you pronounce their names out of respect for them, but they also got a shout out the what they contributed to this movie. So, how'd you put your team together?
Um, yeah, those collaborations kind of came together in different ways. I worked with Diana Vidrascu, who's a great Romanian cinematographer, and she's also an experimental filmmaker in her own right, who shoots a lot on film. And I had met her at the Rotterdam Film Festival a few years before when I was there with my previous film, and we had kept in touch. And I really liked her sensibility. So she brought a lot to it with her visual ideas and her experience working on film. And
One of those great byproducts of those film festivals, right? Those
yeah,
connections.
yeah. And then my composers were who are a couple and a collaborative team, Nick Roth and Olesya Zdarvetska. And Nick is English, Olesya is from Ukraine, but they live in Dublin. And I found them just by asking around musicians and composers that I knew in Ireland. And they were uniquely suited for it because they have such a range of experience and skills. Because they are jazz musicians. Alessia's are really beautifully trained folk singer. They're classical composers. They can do everything basically, and they did a bit of everything for the film because they did an orchestral score, but also most of the music, if you hear like music playing in the background, like there's a kind of bluesy rock song in the background in one scene, they just made that for the film. And there's some old Irish a cappella singing that we call sean-nós singing that you hear in the film, and that's Alesia singing in Irish in a song that they composed for that. Um, so so yeah, it was fun, and I always think, when you talk about the experimentation or playfulness, I find it really exciting when you can give all your collaborators, you can give them space to bring something to it, and you also give them a challenge that it's like, here's some things they've never quite done before, or that they don't quite know how to do, but then everybody has to kind of step their game up and have fun with it.
Well, you mentioned a few things that you learned about the subject, Granuaile, earlier that kind of surprised you. Things that maybe most people thought were fact or factual, and then ended up more on the myth side of things. I'd like to know on the filmmaking side, was there anything, and you spoke to some of the challenges and things, but was there anything that surprised you or jumped out at you, or maybe a special memory from making this film that will stick with you for a while? Aside from working with that amazing team, my God.
Um, God, there was a lot of yeah, there was a lot of things. The first thing that's coming to mind is I we did a scene in the film. It's a scene where Dale Dickey is in a bar on this island talking to an old man um, who seems to be like an old local man, and they're talking about the history of Granuaile. And that man is Bob Quinn, who's a very legendary Irish filmmaker who's like, I think he's 86 or 87 now. And he made the first films on that island, Clare Island, he made a short documentary there in the 60s, and he made the only other feature film on that island with starring Donal McCann in the 80s called Budawani. And he's part of what we call the Irish first wave of Irish cinema in the 70s. We can't call it a new wave because there wasn't enough before it for it to be
Right.
new. It was the first wave. But so I invited him to like come to the shoot and come to the island and shoot this scene, which we improvised. I just let him like, talk about what came to mind. And so that was like a really exciting moment and something where because it was most of the film is pretty closely scripted, but that scene was just I let Dale just like embody her character and say what came to mind, and likewise with him, and I didn't know what I was going to get. And having him being there kind of representing the that history of Irish film and the island, that was a nice moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. It got to be extremely satisfying as a director to see that chemistry happening naturally between your actors.
Hmm.
Well, that's a scene we'll definitely be paying attention to as we screen this here in a couple of weeks. So, how can our film lovers here in Gig Harbor keep up with you and the work you're doing? And then what's in the hopper for you? Do you have any films you're working on currently or projects you can tell us about?
Yeah, well, yeah, people can find me on my website, donalforeman.com, and then also Social media, mostly Instagram. My name, Dónal Foreman. That's where I do more kind of news updates and stuff. And unfortunately, my films are no longer on Criterion, actually.
Oh, okay.
They were there for 6 months, but that just ended at the end of May.
Ah,
But I sell my films to rent or buy on Vimeo, and also my father's films. I've put up a lot more of them recently, so I have like 6 or 7 of his documentaries. And yeah, so that's where they can see more of my stuff or find out about me. And I'm working on I'm editing a documentary, a kind of essay film documentary that I've been shooting in New York. That's about it's about Jamaica Bay, New York, and the kind of past, present, and future of this wild periphery of the city. And then I'm working on scripts, fiction scripts that are at various stages of development, as they say. So I'm working away. And then I also I've been teaching filmmaking here in New York at Brooklyn College, the Fierstein Graduate Film School, which I've been really enjoying. That's been inspiring as well. Yeah.
yeah, busy guy.
Hmm.
So we'll say former Criterion selected films, but available now on Vimeo, which is actually
Hmm.
where I found you. And then socials at Dónal Foreman and donalforeman.com. Make sure I pronounce that correctly. And that'll all be obviously posted in the show notes as well for folks to link directly to you and follow. So, hey, just want to say thank you again, Donald, for being with us. We're excited to see the Cry of Granuaile. That's going to be June. We're already into June 30th here at the Galaxy Theater Gig Harbor, and that's at 6:30 p.m. And of course, everybody can get their tickets at galaxytheaters.com, and we'll link it all in the show notes here. So, Donald, thank you so much. This film's been out for a little while, but we're really excited to see it here in Gig Harbor, and I'm sure everybody's going to really enjoy it. So, thanks for sharing the filmmaking process with us and your time today.
My pleasure. Yeah. Thanks for taking an interest in showing the movie.
Absolutely, and best of luck on your new projects.
Great. Thanks.